Hi everyone, and welcome to another Future of Design Community Fireside Q&A session hosted by myself, Andy Smith of TDA Creative, the design, tech and product talent agency. I am absolutely delighted today to be joined by Stu Smith, who is currently the head of design at Atlassian, based in Austin. Stu, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. Good to be with my cousin Andy here today. It's
I
awesome.
like it. I like it. There's probably a few cousins watching as well. Uh, Stu, give us a bit of a lowdown in your career today into the brilliant role you're in now.
Yeah, so haven't always been in a large tech company, and I really backed my way into design. I started out as a professional musician. That was something that I did for all the like teen years and through high school and college.
I can see a guitar behind you. I've just noticed that. Yeah.
Aging with
Okay.
grace.
There
If
you
you look
go.
over that one, it's like 12 more. So
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
music is still a huge part of my life. But I really got into design through music. Always dabbled with art. I was in art classes growing up, but never even knew that this was a career until somebody came to my high school and was like, "Oh, this Savannah College of Art and Design. This is a program that's around. I think it was even industrial design." But that moment opened up my mind. I was like, "Oh, people do this for a living. That's crazy." So I
Yeah.
started dabbling more into like digital design alongside music, and then it a bit spiraled. I just started doing like album art for people. I then started doing art for like maybe their parents that owned a business.
Right.
And so really like the way I came up as a designer in the very early days was not how I would say a lot of the people that work for me have come up of like proper training. Um, but so that all spun into a long time of like freelancing, running my own design shop, really focused my early parts of the career into branding, identity, and then really found UX more late in the time of doing freelance and running my own practice. Austin, back in like the early 2010s, was really having this moment of like a lot of funding coming through VCs into startups. And so like the same clients that would ask us for logo identity projects would also be like, "Hey, can you like design the first rev of our app? Can you do this? Can you do that?" And when you've got to pay the bills, you always say yes. You're like, "Absolutely, we can do that." And so really found my footing there, and that was kind of a really interesting thing of going from okay, I've been passionate about like the hyper visual side of design.
Yeah.
And then now I'm seeing that there's a lot of other things, especially around then too. It's like a lot of emerging things, like even responsive design was like a very early thing that we were involved in. Design systems were very early. So yeah, really through that like individual practice is where I got started, and then have had subsequent roles where I led design at two startups in between where I'm at now and back then. And so those were in fintech and e-commerce, which I really look at the career as like this stepping into like different circles where I'm like further well-rounding my perspective from everything from like, hey, let's brand our local coffee shop to like these huge global apps.
Nice. Nice. And you've been at Atlassian for quite a while, right?
Yeah, 6.5 years, which is crazy. So
Cool.
I never thought I would be here this long, but I also don't really see a reason to leave at this point, which is awesome. So it's great.
Well, brilliant brand, great products. Um, let's start. What are you most proud of in your career to date, Stu?
Yeah, I think for me it's seeing the things I make out in the world,
Mm,
uh, and it I can kind of unpack that a bit. So like I've always considered myself more of a consumer grade designer. Probably it's coming up through those pathways that I talked about of more like identity and graphic design proper. And so I always like leaving a mark on things. And I've had these moments, like seminal moments, where I've been like driving through my town and like, oh, that is a coffee shop that I've put my stamp on, like almost literally.
brilliant.
So there's things like that where it's like my local coffee shop. Um, there's also oddly enough, a big cowboy boot brand that a group of friends and I got to name and brand and put out into the world. And
Love
I'll
that.
go to places and like see people wearing them, and I'm like, that's crazy. Like the thing that we drew is like there on the bottom of
Yeah.
this. But then also like I've had these other things where those like marks that you do as a graphic designer, you can easily see. But I've also had these moments where um, I've had that in software too. Like I remember right when I joined the Trello team years ago, I had this project that was designing a template feature. It was the first time Trello had really like put out something like this. And it's cool. It was like my first big shot at goal when I was joining Atlassian. And I went to an offsite like a few weeks after it launched. And I was noticing, I was sitting on the plane. I was like, that person 2 rows in front of me is looking at the thing that I designed.
Yeah, I love it.
I don't know. So those moments are like irreplaceable for me.
Yeah,
I just like, I take so much pride in being like, even if I have crit of my own work, I'm like, I freaking love seeing people using the stuff on putting my stamp on.
that's fantastic. Good for you. Good for you. And give us some insight, your key tips for building and managing global and remote design team.
Yeah, yeah, and so for folks that don't know, Atlassian is global; it's everywhere, but particularly based in the U.S. and in Australia are like the main two hubs for us. And so right now in my role, I have a few designers in Australia, a few designers in the U.S., um, and have had kind of different mixes of that, where it's been one geo over the other. And so just for that context, like the couple of points that I want to bring up are first of all, I think people are figuring this out now that like remote doesn't work unless you really fund time together. This is one of the
Mm,
things that I enjoyed about being on the Trello team in the early days is they were, if people remember this, they were like the pioneers of remote work. There were like a few companies like Trello and Buffer and a few, maybe like Zapier, I think, that were like, oh, those are remote first companies. Atlassian was not that six and
right.
a half. I think when I joined, we had 3,000 people and 400 of us worked remote. So it was a very small group. And so the Trello team was awesome about really driving home intentionality around how we spend time together. And that's been baked into things at Atlassian now at the global scale that have been fantastic. So one of the big things that Atlassian does well that if I was to go anywhere else or if I was to stand up another remote team, I would follow the same discipline of we have these things called intentional togetherness gatherings that
Okay.
are and I forget the exact split, but they're designed to be a portion that is work, but the rest is social, get to know your team, spend time together. And so that's like the biggest tip is I actually don't know how teams can do the thing where they never see each other. I think that was the struggle like for people that joined in like 2020, where it took them 18 months to even meet their coworkers.
Yeah.
And it's for a few reasons why I think that that's huge. Like, first of all, like in remote work, you have these conversations that are scheduled on the calendar that are like, okay, I meet with Andy 30 minutes every 2 weeks. So if we were in the office, I would see you at lunch. I would see you like getting out of your car. We would like take a walk.
Yeah.
I would get so much more context about you. And so it's kind of like if you compare it to like little sips versus big gulps, there's like these little sips throughout like your Zoom life where you're like, okay, I got a little bit more, I got a little bit more. The big gulp is like, okay, we're together and we're gonna like experience our surroundings together for 2 days and like actually get to know each other. So that's like one big thing. It's just like
Yeah.
it gives you more context. The other thing is I've really noticed that in remote work, we kind of tell ourselves stories. So in the same way that I was talking about, if I have a one-on-one with you every 2 weeks, the way that I see you in that moment builds the fabric of what I think is your story or how I perceive you. So if say I met with you and it's the end of your day because we're in different time zones, and so it's the end of your day, and each of those times you're a little bit worn out because you worked 8 hours ahead of me, then my perception, without giving it intentional thought, is like, Andy seems kind of tired or uh, maybe a little bit dejected. It's like, well, that's not actually the case because he has an entirely different timetable than me.
That's a great
So
point.
that's
Great
another.
point. Mm,
Well, it's like a thing that I always bring up is that you have to be aware of the story you're telling yourself in a remote context. Because I've seen people get like bad brands at work where it's like, oh, this person is this way. It's like, well, that might not be true. Like, have we ramped up our context? So, went on a little soapbox here, but my biggest thing is, regardless of geo, showing up and being intentional about the time you spent together is the only way that this all works.
yeah,
Um,
I love that.
and yeah, that's the same thing. It's like I'll go to Australia. at some point this year, like for that specific reason. I'm going to take 10 days to like go spend time with my team there, because I
Yeah,
know the value of it.
great. Thank you for that. Yeah, that kind of perception is reality thing is a really interesting point, actually. Thank you for that one.
Yeah.
And biggest lessons learned in design leadership. It sounds like you've just given us one of those, which was great around remote and how to deal with that. But other lessons you've learned in design leadership.
Yeah, I mean that's one. One thing that's funny, I think, if you get into a design team as an IC, like the golden thing is like, oh, I have other designers around me who like I can collaborate with, maybe like share the problem space with. And you'll often hear like design leaders say like design leadership is lonely. What I've actually figured out in the last couple of years is less that it's more your partners and closest circles of collaborators change to not be designers. So my closest collaborators now are my engineering partners, who are other heads of engineering, my head of product partners that I
Yeah,
work with, SBO, so like strategy and business operations partner, our data science leads, our program management leads.
yeah,
These are the people that have now become my partners. And so that's the biggest lesson is like, you still have to nurture home base with your design team. That's absolutely like key. That's table stakes. I think a lot of people miss that next part though of developing that next level of leaders. And I also see oftentimes people will get into like an us versus them mentality with other functions, and that's back to maybe it's just a through line of like how I roll, but that's also essential to me is like I need to intimately know my partners, so that I can unlock more things for my team.
yeah.
And so when I hear like design leaders sometimes say like design leadership is lonely, it's like I get that, but also I think like these are the people that you go to most. So
Yeah, that cross collaboration piece. We recently held some roundtables in New York, and we had design leaders and product leaders in the room from different companies, and it was interesting and great. There's just some fruitful knowledge came out of that one for sure.
it's awesome.
Um, Subject of AI on everyone's tip of the tongue. Do you see AI? Is it now a necessary component in your strategic thinking for everything you do as a design leader?
Um, I'll break the question into like two things. It's
Okay.
like so is like I guess to rephrase it, is AI necessary in my role? Absolutely. And and I'll unpack that a bit more. Like I think it's the same way, or I see it the same way as when, say, something like Figma came out, or responsive design came out, or design systems. Um, the design leader that is not paying attention and not actively upskilling themselves in these areas, like, and by upskilling I mean mainly just like go play with the tools. That's like the main thing to do is just go have fun with some of these crazy tools. Like I spent the last weekend, like as much as I try and keep the laptop closed on the weekend, I was like, well, I want to play with Lovable and see what this is all about, because I'm hearing our teams internally talk about agents. I'm hearing our engineers talk about using Cursor, and so that was like a really eye-opening experience for me. I was able to experience some of that magic. So
Right.
my perspective is absolutely necessary to play with the tools. I think there's like fear that like the design is under threat from these tools, which there might be some roles that are absolutely, um, but I think as a leader, I have to know where the wind's blowing with this. So that's like
Yeah.
the first part of it. Like, is it necessary for my role? 100%. And then on the strategic thinking side, um, yes, as well. I think how it's being baked into my thinking now is um, in the same way that I was talking about with like these other more nascent technologies of like responsive, like we've got that nailed.
Yeah.
Uh, it's it's really key to me to understand how these things work so that I can ideate against them. Like right now, we are exploring like what is the role of agents in our products. What are now the like emerging user expectations? What are the patterns that
Mm.
are emerging in design? The other big one that I've been thinking about a lot lately is how do we um, how do we design and build our products in a way that can be used by agents? That's like another thing. So
Okay. Yep.
yeah, like so if you imagine like an agent is supposed to go in and do something across your software, well, okay, we've always built software for humans. How do we build it for essentially like robots to also interface with it? It sounds so crazy, but so yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's like it's. I think it's highly necessary of like be aware, but then feed that into now that you are aware and have working knowledge. Like, how would it influence your product? And I also think that like this stuff makes 24-month roadmaps really funny right now because it's just like, okay, we can like think about it that way, but also in 3 months there might be a whole different perspective we have that that really changes things.
Yeah. Cool. We could have a whole chat on that. I'm talking to quite a few design leaders at the moment about the maturing of design roles and how they're going to change and even new roles. So the opportunities for designers, right, to work with the new technologies rather than
Yeah,
just feeling the threat is vast.
yeah, and I that's the other thing is I think anybody in design like should like we're talking a lot about leadership, but I think if you're even like an early career designer, you ought to have something like Lovable or like Replit pulled up, even even if your company doesn't allow you to like use the tool at work, like use it as a thought partner right there because it was really interesting doing that experience with Lovable where I was like, okay, I have an app that I've thought about for a long time, um, and the way that it sped up me thinking about the things that I might miss if it was just up to me was like pretty amazing. I'm like, oh, if I was 2 years into this career, this thing would be like steroids for my own productivity.
That's great. Great advice there. Thank you. You're going to get a few people having a good look at Lovable now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end of our time for the chat, but as I always like to do, a little curveball question at the end there. Can you tell us something that few people know about you?
Yeah, I think like I talk a lot about the stuff I'm into. So there's like a lot of things that I I I could go to, but the one that I think very few people know about me is I'm like kind of just like a country kid at heart. Like growing up, we had a farm. I knew how to drive a tractor before I knew how to drive a car. Like, and seriously, I
Cool.
started driving a tractor at 5 years old.
Wow.
Like not like a lawn tractor, like a big proper one that like is dangerous. And
I've
so
got an image in my head right now. It's great.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the denim shirt maybe is giving it away, but yeah. I mean, like I'm in. Yeah, so that is like really in my DNA. I'm like, I'm so thankful for having that experience. Like, I think I gravitated towards answering the question that way because in tech, like we all have different backgrounds for sure.
Yeah.
But it could be easy to assume like, oh, maybe like my parents worked in tech or like I have any sort of like background. It's like, no way, absolutely not. Like my grandfather owned a cotton gin. Like, my dad was a pastor and teacher. Like this is none of my background. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so it's like, it's fun for me. And it's also like, it plays into like maybe some other things of like, really when I'm not doing this, I'm actively like usually using power tools, doing something around the house. Like I am very much like a person that, because of that experience, like working and growing up on a farm, like I'm very like handy, hands-on, and just yeah, sort of enjoy that. So
Good. That's fantastic. And obviously music's a big passion as well, and you're probably in the right place being in Austin for that.
yeah, yeah, I'm actually playing a show tonight too. So
Oh, there you go. There you
yeah,
go. Oh, it's a shame I'm in London town at the moment. Also, I'll come and watch.
yeah,
Anyway, Stu, thank you so much for being my guest today. Really
yeah.
appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me.
And we look forward to seeing you in future TDA Future Design community events.
Yep. See you soon, Andy.
Thanks, Stu.